It is one of the most beautiful burial grounds in New England. And today on Across the Fence, I'll talk with the author of a new book on the Lakeview Cemetery in Burlington. She'll reveal some of the stories behind the fascinating and sometimes famous people who are buried there. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us Across the Fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Today's guest is a Burlington native who's been scaring up haunted history in the area for more than 20 years. Thea Lewis is the creator of the Queen City Ghost Walk and the author of several books, including Ghosts and Legends of Lake Champlain and Wicked Vermont. Lewis's latest book is entitled Lakeview Cemetery of Burlington, Vermont. It is filled with stories about people who shaped the Queen City and the surrounding area during the 19th and 20th centuries. And it is also filled with photographs highlighting many of the cemetery's memorials and other works of stone. Joining us this afternoon via Zoom is the author Thea Lewis. Welcome back to Across the Fence, Thea, and thank you for being with us.
It's so nice to be with you, Fran.
So why did you write about this cemetery?
Well, I've been working with the History Press Arcadia publishers for a while, since my first book, Haunted Burlington. And they gave me a call right around the time I was first doing promotion for Wicked Vermont, and said that they were doing pretty well with their cemetery book series and wondered if I'd like to write a book about Lakeview. Since we were already doing tours in Lakeview Cemetery, it seemed like a pretty natural fit.
Absolutely. So let's go there. And one of the most striking features at Lakeview is a small Victorian Gothic revival style stone building at the cemetery entrance. And it may be small, but it certainly is very meaningful at the cemetery. Tell us about its significance.
That is the Louisa Chapel, and it's one of my favorite places to walk by, drive by in the city of Burlington. It was the brainchild of a wonderful woman, Louisa Howard, whose brother was also a philanthropist in the city of Burlington. He donated much of the land for the cemetery, but Louisa realized that there was really no place after one of the local folks' loved ones was interred for them to gather. And so she donated the money to build this wonderful structure, this great Gothic revival chapel there at the front of the cemetery. You go through the gate, and it's pretty hard to miss. It's a wonderful feature.
Beautiful, and was actually kind of abandoned for a little while and brought back to life, which is fantastic.
It was, yeah.
So yes, both her and her brother were amazing here. There are many amazing people that are commemorated there, and in the book you tell the fascinating story of a business owner. Or there's her brother, John Purple.
There
Howard.
he is.
But we'll move on to a fascinating story of an entrepreneur and business owner who started the first telephone exchange in Burlington. Tell us about him.
Alvaro Adsit. He was quite a character. He had his hand in a couple of different businesses. And when he started the telephone exchange, he really only intended to use the telephone to be able to communicate from his business up in the center of Burlington with a little satellite place down at the waterfront. He had a coal company. So Adsit wanted to communicate from one office to another, and he bought these phones from a guy who was coming through Burlington. And at that point in time, I should let you know that there really weren't, Winooski had a phone, and that was a phone that was used to relay messages to the pharmacy there. But Adsit slowly built this enterprise until finally he and a local doctor who was his partner had this phone exchange. The funny thing is, I was talking with his relatives some years ago when I was writing, I think, Ghosts and Legends of Lake Champlain, and was told that when it was time to sell the stocks and AT&T was being formed, they said, we want this exchange, and we want to know, would you like the money we're paying you in stocks, or would you like cash? And Adsit said, oh my gosh, I want cash. What in the world would I do with all that AT&T stock? So not
in hindsight.
In the early 1900s, People just didn't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, Lakeview is also the final resting place for a number of prominent Vermonters who are committed to education. Names like Wheeler, Barnes, and Flynn are all namesakes for Burlington City Schools. And John Flynn, John J. Flynn, may have been the most famous of them all. Flynn was not only involved in education, he was also integral in businesses important to Vermont's energy and transportation history. Childless, he was nevertheless concerned about the well-being of Burlington youth. So tell us about John.
John J. Flynn came to the city of Burlington as a mere teenager and began working for a local farmer. Within a couple of years, he began managing the farm and then finally took the lease, and the farm was essentially his. He was involved in the retail grocery business. He brought the electric trolley car to Burlington, and he was one of these guys who was such an adept wheeler dealer and negotiator that at one point, while he lived in the city of Burlington as a very powerful force, he talked a manufacturing company that was planning to move their business to St. Albans, a broom company, into staying in the city of Burlington. He did love children, even though he didn't have any of his own. And every year on New Year's Day, he put on a huge banquet for the messengers and newspaper boys who lived in the city of Burlington. They would have a meal in a big hotel, a turkey dinner, and always ice cream for dessert and a free ticket to one of his theaters.
Fantastic. Well, let's talk about the theater. Everyone knows about the Flynn Theater in Burlington, and this is the very man who built that.
Absolutely. It was a little bit of a struggle to get it done. The city did complain that he was in violation of some of the zoning laws, but he built the theater on a piece of property he already owned and said all the other locals who were building things in town were building on their footprint. He couldn't understand why he couldn't build on his.
Terrific. And then there's the Vermonter who became the first person to drive a car across the country, Dr. Horatio Nelson Jackson.
You know, Horatio is one of my favorite characters. He and his dog Bud traveling across the United States in one of those very first automobiles. At one point, it's a story I just love that is mentioned in the book. He was headed down a road, needed something from one of the locals. They led him on kind of a wild goose chase. And long story short, when he got to where he was going, they didn't have what he needed, but they said, they just all wanted to show their relatives the car that he was driving.
Right. Something, and that was in 1903. And there really weren't roads or infrastructure.
No.
Really something. So, also in nearly every cemetery there are plots and stones that are already owned. And even though the person is still alive, they have their plots ready for them. And there are some examples of those at Lakeview.
Oh gosh, and a notable one. I know where we're going with this. Chuck and Jan Perkins have built this wonderful monument. There they are, and people will remember them. And yes, they are still alive today, as being a driving force behind the ski industry in Burlington. Jan has told me stories, and I mentioned in the book, that when they started the Alpine Shop in Burlington, their children were babies, and they would often come downstairs when they were just barely old enough to reach the counter, and someone would hear a tiny voice in the store say, "May I help you?" They're still a force in the ski industry, not just in Vermont, but across the country today. And they are charming people. They built this stunning monument with the skis on either sides of the doors of this fantastic mausoleum. And when we take Queen City Ghost Walk tours into the cemetery, we always bring them to this monument to let them get a load of what what you could have if you decide that that's the way you want to go. I mean, your eternal rest can be pretty cool if you like it to be.
Yeah, it's beautiful and so unique. Lakeview is also the final home for a number of Vermonters who served with distinction for the Union in the Civil War. One of those was General William Wells, and he was the father of Horatio Nelson's wife, Bertha, right?
Yes, and Wells was one of these characters who I'm not sure whether there was a thing Wells didn't do well. As a young man, very young, in his teens still, he was a surveyor near his hometown of Waterbury. And when the Civil War started, he joined up and finally attained the rank of brevet major general. Brevet was a word I had to look up because I wasn't familiar with it. And if you are a brevet major general, you're conferred that title without the authority or the pay that goes with it, but it's for service that is meritorious. He is someone that people will be familiar with. Anybody who walks through Burlington's Battery Park will see that statue. That one in particular is the replica of the statue at Gettysburg. He served with such valor. I think he's the most decorated Vermonter in the Civil War. And then he went on to be a businessman in the city of Burlington. His stone is a great example of what we look for in stones that tell us about the stature of folks when they were alive. His stone is a very masculine stone, a very prominent stone, and it is definitely the stone of someone who would have been a major mover and shaker in the city back in his day.
Absolutely. When I go to cemeteries, I like the different styles that I see, and you have some examples of gravestones of children.
Yes.
So that's another kind of very moving thing for me.
When we walk into the cemetery, just as it's getting dark, when we go on our Queen City Ghost Walk tours of Lakeview, I love to show people the features of the cemetery, the city vault, and also talk about traditions. And one of the traditions that really hasn't changed is the way that we showcase or talk about our loved ones who've passed away. And often on the graves of children, you might see a little lamb or tiny shoes. One of those stones that you're showing now actually has a little dog, a pet that indicates, loyalty.
Right.
And anytime you see, the small animals, I mean, it's usually someone who has died very young.
Lovely. So quickly, Thea, sorry, we're out of time, but how can interested viewers find your new book on Lakeview Cemetery?
Well, I love my friends at Phoenix Books in Burlington, Essex. They have other locations around the state. Yankee Bookstore. They carry my books very often. You can find a signed copy. And also the books are available on the Arcadia publishing site and on Amazon.com.
Okay. Thea Lewis, thank you so much for joining us again Across the Fence.
Thanks for having me.
And once again, thank you for joining us Across the Fence. I'm Fran Stoddard. Stay well.